Welcome to today's webinar, How to Prepare for AWS Certification and Advance Your Career. Our presenter today is Russell Sayers. Today with us, we also have Andrew, Sarah, Yana, Neve, Biff, Brian, and Sean. They are our webinar moderators who will be engaging with you and answering any questions you have throughout the presentation. Welcome, Russell. The floor is now yours.
Hello everyone, and welcome again to How to Prepare for Certification and Advance Your Career. How to prepare for certification and advance your career. Let's just give me a second to introduce myself. My name is Russell Sayers. I am a training architect in the training and certification team, a technical architect in the training and certification team. I came to Amazon just over 4 years ago. I actually started out here as a software engineer. I made the move over to the training and certification team where I worked for 2 years as a technical trainer. So I've spent 2 years traveling around teaching the courses that we teach for Amazon Web Services. Fairly recently I made the move to become a technical architect, so I'm now one of the people who works on the software and the systems that hosts a lot of our training materials. Okay, so today's presentation or webinar is how to prepare for certification and advance your career. Why is it people want to do this? I'm looking at the results from the survey, and I do see a lot of people attending today are relatively new to AWS. A lot of people are in their first year on AWS, and I do see a handful of people already have their certifications. So I think probably most of the attendees here are pretty convinced that certification on AWS is a good idea, but what are some of the reasons that our customers are deciding to take some AWS certifications? Cloud migration is accelerating, and AWS is innovating faster than ever. There's a graph here to show the rapid pace of innovation that we're having here at AWS, the number of new services and features being launched every year. In my time as a trainer, the best thing about AWS was the pace of innovation. It was also the thing that everyone attending training expected me to be up to date on. So I spend a lot of time reading the AWS blog, the AWS What's New, just to see what new features are coming out on AWS. There is certainly a demand for cloud skills because of this rapid pace of innovation, because of the number of customers moving their workloads to AWS. Companies certainly need cloud expertise now more than ever. And there's a graph here of number of job postings that are including AWS, which is certainly a graph that is going up and to the right. Certifications as a candidate, as someone working in the IT industry, will certainly validate your knowledge with an industry recognized credential. Myself, a lot of my AWS knowledge, I used AWS a lot in a previous job. I think I turned on my first EC2 instance in 2008. In my previous job, a lot of my AWS knowledge was self-taught. When you're self-taught, you're not learning everything in its completion. You're learning what you need to know. I find with a certification, I'm sitting down and learning things properly and discovering some things that I didn't know when I was actually using this technology in my day-to-day job. So we say getting certified will validate your expertise, advance your career, and you're also joining a community of like-minded certified individuals. Industry research says that this is recognized by the industry as a high-paying certification. There's some numbers there for average annual salary. And we say 73% of respondents to this survey noted an increase in their job effectiveness. And again, I do think this comes from learning things properly. In my previous role, I was self-taught. There were certainly some gaps in my knowledge. Maybe I didn't know what I don't know. But certification required me to sit down, read the materials, and learn things in a kind of complete manner. There's some quotes there from some IT professionals saying that AWS certification helped establish my technical credibility. And another quote here from an architect at Accenture saying the company now sees Deepak as an expert in my area and colleagues consult me on cloud solutions more often. So it certainly helps get you recognized. And for me, I think one of the big advantages is forcing yourself to learn things properly. So in the AWS training and certification team, we currently have 5 certifications out there. I actually have passed all 5. In my role as a trainer, it was sort of a job expectation that if I'm going to teach for these certifications, I need to go out and sit down and take them. I did all the associate level exams first. So exams are broken up here by job role and are offered in both an associate and professional level. There's a Solutions Architect Associate, Developer Associate, SysOps Administrator Associate. The next logical exam to take after these are the professional exams, where the associate exam is actually a hard requirement to take before taking the professional exam. So I think I actually did the exams almost exactly in the order that they are displayed here. I did Solutions Architect, Developer, SysOps, Associate level exams, and then I did the Professional Solutions Architect and the Professional DevOps Engineer. We do have coming up soon some specialty certifications, so there will be some additional security, advanced networking, and big data specialty certifications coming along. So how do we prepare for an AWS certification? Let's walk through some steps of how it is a lot of people are preparing for their certifications. And I also need to remind people the certifications are designed to test your hands-on experience. There is really no substitute for hands-on experience with the services themselves. So as a rough number, we say the associate exams expect roughly 12 months, 6 to 12 months of hands-on experience with the services. That number is going to be different for different people. Maybe in your role, you are only using one particular service. Maybe the majority of your experience is with EC2, for example. Preparing for the certification is a lot of learning what you don't know and focusing your study on those areas. So starting at step number 1, we say take a training class. The training team does offer the certification preparation classes. Review the exam guide and sample questions. So I'll pop up some links later on. If you go to aws.amazon.com/certification, we have a list of all of our exams on there, which clicks through to an exam guide and sample questions. The exam guide tells you roughly the kind of knowledge that we are testing in these exams, and there are a set of sample questions of what to expect in the exam. Once we're through with this, let's pop up some sample questions and just walk through what to expect in the exams. You can certainly practice using the QuickLabs self-paced labs. So quicklabs.com, there is a set of self-paced labs where we give you a list of instructions and you pop out into the AWS console and follow those instructions. The labs are available for almost every service you can think of. So this is a very nice, easy, quick way to jump into a sandbox, follow through a lab. If there is a service that you've never dealt with before, there's introductory level labs for almost every service. I find a lot of preparing for an exam is just discovering where those missing spots are in your knowledge and focusing your study on that. Myself personally, when I sat the developer exam, I'd actually never used DynamoDB in the past. So I sat down and did a lot of labs with DynamoDB. I set myself a little project to code. I was a software engineer previously to learn a lot of the features of DynamoDB. We say study the AWS white papers. There are a lot of white papers and a lot of content in those white papers. The exam guides do link off to relevant white papers for each exam. I'd say a good one to start with, one of our white papers is the overview of Amazon Web Services. And again, that's going to show you the areas where you need to focus your study on. You'll read through the overview of Amazon Web Services, and maybe you've never played with Direct Connect. Maybe you've never read up on a service like DynamoDB or SQS. That's where I would focus my study. Myself personally, I like to set myself a timeline for the study. Like I'll say, I'm going to spend the next X days studying. I go and book in the exam, so I have the fear. Like when that exam appears on your calendar, then your brain switches into a mode where, yes, I certainly have to study for this. I personally like to limit my amount of study time, because if I study for too long, if I study for over like 4 weeks, I'll forget what I studied in the first week. So I time box that, and I give myself a little bit of a review at the end of my study. There are AWS FAQs for a lot of our services, and they are the frequently asked questions for those services. There's not too much reading to be done there. When I'm time boxing my study, I'm also filtering out what I do and don't need to read. Reading the FAQs is not going to take up a lot of your time, so I would certainly spend some time on the FAQs. There are exam prep workshops, though that is instructor-led training for these exams. And take a practice exam. When you click through to the exam details on our website, there is a link off to our certification partner Criterion, where you can take a practice exam inside a browser. So you can take that from your own laptop, you go through to the Criterion website, and it will give you a set of example questions that are going to be very similar to what to expect in the actual exam. Step number 8, take your certification exam. And hopefully there's a step after this that says you are now AWS certified. So let's jump into some sample questions. I've prepared some sample questions from our 3 associate exams of just what you can expect to see in the exams. This is from our Solution Architect Associate exam. Let me read through the question. You are architecting a website for viewers of a commercial let me start again. You are architecting a website for viewers of a commercial to complete a survey. The survey is an interactive PHP application displaying a dynamic set of questions to each viewer. Which architecture will use auto-scaling to scale out during periods of peak demand while providing a cost-optimized solution? The bolding or the emphasis there is my own. I've bolded those to just highlight in the question there are going to be some things that stand out. It says that it's an interactive PHP application. Already I'm thinking through my head, what are the services that are going to help me host a PHP application? There are a dynamic set of questions for each viewer. Okay, that could be important. Maybe we want to avoid something that is, this is highlighting the fact that it is not static content. We're going to avoid a service that would be oriented more towards static content. Which architecture will use auto-scaling to scale out during periods of peak demand, and a cost-optimized solution? Okay, those are some things that I'm certainly going to consider when I look through the multiple choices here. When I'm sitting in an exam, I can usually exclude maybe 2 of the answers. There's going to be 2 answers that kind of stand out to me as no, that's not possible, or no, that's not a service of AWS. And a lot of the time it comes down to 2 questions that I'm debating which is the correct one here. So let's walk through the answers and exclude some that we don't believe are the correct answers. Very first answer there, A. Calculate the instances that will accommodate peak load and use this number for your auto-scaling minimum. That stands out to me as something I probably don't want to do. Auto-scaling is the service that is going to scale out at peak demand. This answer here is saying, let's turn on all the instances that we need for peak load. That doesn't sound very cost optimized to me. Answer B, create an auto-scaling group 30% larger than the size needed for peak load, stop some instances, and configure auto-scaling to start instances as traffic increases. This is one that I would exclude straight away because I happen to know auto-scaling does not stop and start instances. Whoever wrote this question here is trying to test our knowledge of how auto-scaling works. So I would say no to that one. Auto-scaling does not stop and start instances. Answer C, move static content to CloudFront and S3. Yes, CloudFront and S3 certainly can host static content. It's a web application. There's going to be JavaScript, PHP files, JavaScript and JPEGs, images, style sheets. That is all static content in a web application. I would see some performance benefit from moving that to S3 with a CloudFront distribution in front of it. Configure auto-scaling instances configure auto-scaling to add instances to the group as traffic increases. Yes, auto-scaling can certainly do that. And configure a launch configuration with an AMI that contains your web application. Okay, so far that is looking like the best answer to me. Answer D says move the PHP application to CloudFront and S3. I would almost be tempted to stop reading at that point. Does anyone think that we would host a PHP application in S3? No, unfortunately S3 is a good place to host static content. S3 would not be the place where I would be hosting a PHP application. So I would go with answer C. Moving on to our sample developer associate question. Let me read through the question. A recently deployed application is using DynamoDB to store customer registration. Customers are given a unique randomized hash for the primary key. The application has been working without issue for a month. After an uninspected increase in customer registrations, we are now seeing a large number of application exceptions and customer complaints. What could be a potential cause of the issue? So again, the emphasis is mine, the bolding is mine. We are using a unique randomized hash for the primary key. I do remember reading that's actually key entropy is giving you the best use of your provision performance for Dynamo. That sounds like a good idea. The application has been working without issue for a month. Reading that makes me think there's going to be some answers that I can exclude because they are things that would have totally broken the application. So there's a little bit of a clue to us that the application was working, but now it's not working. Well, what would we associate that with? Let's walk through some sample questions, some sample answers, sorry. Answer A, the VPC subnet of the application instance is missing a route to the internet gateway. I would exclude that because that is the sort of thing that would entirely break your application. Everything was previously working. Without a VPC route, the application would not work. DynamoDBs and reads and writes are exceeding the provision throughput of a DynamoDB table. That is sounding like a correct answer to me, actually. When you provision a DynamoDB table, you specify the performance of the reads and writes that you want to perform against that table. If you do exceed the number of reads and writes, you will see exceptions happening in your application. That does sound like a potential answer to me. Let's jump back. D, the IAM policy to allow is throttling DynamoDB traffic. That does not sound like a correct answer. I don't know of an IAM policy that sets the performance of DynamoDB traffic. Answer C, the randomized key is causing suboptimal usage of the provision throughput. I'm going to exclude that one. Having key entropy actually gives you the optimal use of throughput. So let's go with answer B. It looks like we've exceeded our reads or writes provision throughput on our dynamo table. So sample question for our SysOps associates. Which of the following is not available via a standard CloudWatch metric? So CloudWatch is the service that is monitoring a lot of our usage of AWS services, and we do get a set of standard CloudWatch metrics. The question is telling us or asking us to exclude the things that are standard metrics. What are the metrics that we do get from CloudWatch? Which of these is a metric that we do not get from CloudWatch? Answer A, the number of bytes currently used by hash tables on an Amazon Elasticache node. If I was sitting the exam right now, I would think maybe that's a service provided by AWS Elasticache. Seems plausible that they would be delivering metrics related to the hash tables in the cache node. That actually is a metric. It's called bytes used for hash. Memory utilization on an EC2 instance. Does CloudWatch tell me the amount of memory used on my EC2 instance? I would guess no. So CloudWatch is going to know about the virtualization of the instance. CloudWatch has no automatic visibility into what's running on your instance. It's certainly possible via a custom metric. We could add a little bit of script onto our EC2 instance to post into CloudWatch and tell CloudWatch how much memory we're using, but I don't believe that's a standard metric. Let's continue on. Disk usage activity on the EC2 instance. We've jumped ahead there. Disk usage activity, yes, I happen to know, I have gone and dived into CloudWatch to see an instance that was that was running a database that was running very slow. And to diagnose that, I wanted to know what the disk performance was. And yes, CloudWatch will give you metrics on both ephemeral storage, local instance storage, and the attached EBS volumes. The number of connections that were not successfully established between the load balancer and the registered EC2 instance. We have ELB load balancers. Behind the ELB load balancer is an EC2 instance. And yes, there is a metric that will tell you the number of back-end connection errors. And disk usage we've already spoken about. There are metrics for the number of reads, number of writes, number of operations on those volumes. When it comes to CloudWatch, I remember myself that CloudWatch will only have visibility into the things that AWS is virtualizing. CloudWatch is not going to be able to see what is happening inside your instance. That would require a custom metric. And the question is giving us a little bit of a clue there. It's saying what is not available in the standard metrics. Okay, so that is the end of all of our sample questions. We have left some time at the end here for some Q&A. For those of you interested in certification, your next steps would be reviewing the exam-specific preparation on our website. I can jump out to a browser and just give us a little bit of a demo of what that looks like. So easy URL to remember. We will send out an email at the end of this with some links. But I go to awsamazon.com/certification. And over here on the left-hand side is a link to our certifications. Let's click through to that. There are yes, DevOps appears as 2 boxes. I was about to say, why are there 6 boxes? There are the 5 exams that we're currently discussing. Let's click through to the Solutions Architect. I want to learn more about the Solutions Architect Associate exam. Here are the links to go and schedule the exam. with our certification partner. There is instructor-led training for an exam workshop, the exam guide, so that downloads a PDF, a blueprint of what to expect in the certifications. There is a link through to some sample questions. Maybe use that to guide yourself in your study. I look at the sample questions. If there is a service in there that I've never heard of or a service that I don't use in my day-to-day usage of AWS, that's something I add to the list of things that I need to go and study. Take a practice exam. That will take you through to our training partner, Web Assessor by Criterion. The practice exam, I think, is currently $20 US. There is a little tip coming up on that one. So the practice exam, you do it on your own laptop inside a browser, and it will give you a score at the end. And it will actually give you scores by category. And again, that informs your study. What do you need to go and brush up upon before you schedule the actual exam? And the Certified Solutions Architect also has a study guide book, and that links through to Amazon.com, and there is the official study guide for AWS Certified Solutions Architect. So schedule your exam, have a date to study for. I do like to schedule my exam ahead of time. It kind of puts there's a little bit of psychology to it. Your brain will switch into a mode where it realizes that exam's coming up. I need to set aside some time to study. And take the practice exam online just to test your knowledge before the exam date. And that opens things up for the Q&A. So there have been some questions being asked while I've been speaking. I can drill down onto some of those questions and repeat them for the audience here. Very first question here is, what is the difference between architect and developer? So looking at job roles, architect is probably operating at a higher level, designing how systems are going to work. And architect is expected to have knowledge across a broad set of services. The job role developer, there are going to be services more relevant to a developer. For example, I would expect maybe some more DynamoDB questions in an exam for developers. Moving along to the next question. We're being asked, in the Web Assessor site, I see two different AWS certification exams. One is SA, the other is extended. Can you please provide more details on the extended? So I do believe that is being offered for people who need additional time to take the exam. Click through to that on the website. It'll explain how you can go through the process of taking the extended exam. That is offered for people who maybe English is not your first language, or you need some additional time to take the exam. Okay, next question. Are you required to retake the certification from time to time? And the answer is yes. Customers and partners are required to update their certification every 2 years. And I did do this just a month ago, actually. Here in Seattle, I drove up to the Seattle Community College and retook my professional certification. Click through to that on the website. You do need to recertify every 2 years. You have 12 months to take your recertification. And for the associate level exams, attaining the professional follow-on exam will lock in your associate certification. Then you do need to recertify on the professional exam. I just did my professional solutions architect, and I will have to do my DevOps professional very soon. There's a question here. Has AWS released an official guide for the Solution Architect Professional exam? Solution Architect Professional. We're looking into producing more study guides, but we don't have any dates for the guides at this point. Currently, we do have the Solution Architect Associate Study Guide. I just need to pick up another question here. Are you required to take this? No, I've answered that one. Is there any self-study resources approved by Amazon? And the answer is the same as the last question. We have a certification study guide released by Amazon. Okay, I just need to, I'm clicking through the questions here. Okay, so circling back to the extended exam form, extended exams contain non-scored items that will help validate questions for future exams. Extended versions are 30 minutes longer and include a 50% discount off the full exam price. So circling back to that question, extended versions have some additional questions, 30 minutes longer, and there is a 50% discount off the full exam price. Okay, diving back onto the questions and answers, where can we get in-class training? We offer training through our own trainers, and we also have authorized training providers worldwide. I believe if you go to aws.training will be the short link that will get you straight there, and that will give you a search for all the training offered by AWS and our authorized training partners. That's exactly what my job was up until very recently. Worth mentioning, there are also some online courses that are free to take. I know that there are big data and introduction to security that are entirely online that you can take in. I think it's a 3-hour online course for security and introduction to big data. Next question, will the specialty exams be something that will help towards my path to professional certification? So specialty exams do not help towards professional certification. They are classified as a separate certification. This is something relatively new, actually. I'm most familiar with the 5 exams that I've passed, and we do have the upcoming 3 specialty exams: security, big data, and advanced networking on AWS. Okay, next question. Where should I check for the AWS FAQ and whether answers will be up to date? So there is an FAQ for each individual service. If you link through to the product page, for example, EC2, go to awsamazon.com, click through to the product page for EC2 or Lambda or RDS, and there'll be an individual FAQ for the service. Next question, what are the timelines for exams being updated in regard to new AWS features being introduced? I get this question pretty frequently because of the rate of innovation that happens at AWS. There are constantly new services, new features being introduced, and we say questions are updated and are about 3 to 6 months behind the current technology. The questions are certainly worded in a way to get maximum shelf life. So in my study, I really do focus a lot on the core services. Okay, this is a question that we get pretty frequently that we can't answer. What is the passing percentage required to pass the exam? Whenever I'm at reInvent, I'm usually there at the training and certification booth. I get this question at least once an hour, which I certainly can't answer. What I can say is the certification passing scores are set by statistical analysis, subject to change. We do not publish passing scores because exam questions and passing scores are subject to change without notice. And a reminder, the exams are designed to test your hands-on knowledge. Keep that in mind with your study. It's not, I wouldn't set out to just pass the exam. I would set out to brush up on my hands-on experience with AWS. Next question, how can I verify if a person I'm hiring is AWS certified? Is there a reference number we can look up? They should be able to share a certificate with you. When you complete the exam, you are emailed the verification from WebAssessor, and that can be used to verify someone's AWS certified status. Okay, so what is the appropriate entry-level exam for a network engineer? This question has been assigned to me. Appropriate entry-level exam for a network engineer. I don't think any of our exams neatly slot into that job role. Architect, so solution architect is going to be the most wide-ranging of exams. It is the one that is covering the most topics. Solution architect, I believe, is the exam most people take first. So maybe have a look at the practice exam, maybe have a look at the sample questions and see how comfortable you are with that. The SysOps Administrator, there is going to be some overlap with what is expected in that role. Developer is certainly going to overlap. We're going to ask questions about AWS services, but we are going to focus on the services that are more relevant to a developer. So is the practical exam, will it be similar to the real one as in the time and the number of questions? So practical exam, the practice exam, I believe is less questions than the actual exam. It has been a little while since I sat that. The numbers for the actual exam, I believe associate exams are roughly 50 questions. The sample exam is less, but it is a very good indication of what types of questions to expect in the exam. Another question about new certifications. What new certifications are we planning to release soon? The 3 new specialty exams, Security, Advanced Networking, and Big Data, are currently in development. The plans are to release these this year in 2017. So keep an eye on the website for more details in the few coming months. There's a question here for the AWS Developer Associate. Is there a programming language that's a must? What is the language recommended? Very easy answer to that one. There are not any language-specific questions in the developer exam. The exam certainly does focus on AWS services. We do expect developing experience, the knowledge of a language or maybe a scripting language or programming language, but the exam is not asking you questions on specific language topics. The exam is going to focus on AWS services. Another question on the passing score, yet again. Passing score is a statistical analysis and subject to change. How much does exam cost? So associate level exams are $150 US. Professional and specialty exams are $300. For the actual exam, do you go to a testing facility? That is correct. You go to a criterion testing center. I did this just recently. You'll get an email giving you all the details about the testing center. Something very important to remember is you're required to take 2 pieces of identification, some form of photo identification and another form of identification with your name on it. I personally use my driver's license and my credit card for ID. And they went through some additional security procedures. I had to lock away my cell phone and my wallet before taking the exam. If you have a professional certification, do you need to recert on the associate level? Professional level exams do recertify you for the associate level exam. If you take the Solutions Architect Professional, that is recertifying your Solutions Architect Associate. If you take the DevOps Pro exam, that is recertifying you for the Developing exam and the SysOps Administrator exam. You do need to recertify for the professional level. I just did my SA Pro certification, recertification just last month. What is the approximate amount of time required to sit the exam? Associate level exams are 80 minutes. Professional exams are 180 minutes. And in my experience, the associate level exam, I really didn't need to manage my time. I found that I had plenty of time to complete the associate level exam. That's in my experience. That's going to be different for different people. For the professional level exams, I certainly used that entire 3 hours to complete the exam. You get all the way to the end of the exam, your brain is fried, and then I forced myself to go back and read over the questions. Like all exams, I'm fearful of modifying a question. Maybe there's a question where I'm not quite sure if I answered correctly or incorrectly. I'm fearful of toggling that in the right direction, but I forced myself to use all of that time for the professional level exams. There's a question here. I plan to do lots of hands-on training and online courses. Can I skip reading the book? Yes, I would say yes, you can. There was certainly a time when there was no book and people were taking the exam before the book. Honestly, the very best experience for these exams is hands-on training. Jump into quick labs, do some labs, have a look at some online courses. The book is not absolutely essential. I think the one thing that is going to put you in the best place to pass the exam is hands-on industry experience. If it's not something you do in your day-to-day job, have a look at some sample exams, take the practice exam, set yourself some little projects to do inside of AWS, get a lot of that hands-on experience from actually using the services. Question here, what is the order for taking the exam? The only enforced order is the professional exams require you to have taken the related associate exam. The associate exams you can do in any sequence that you want to. How did you space preparation between studying and the actual test? How many prep days? I can answer this question as to how I personally prepared for it. Different people learn in different ways. If I spend too long preparing, I start forgetting what I've prepared. So I time box that. I spent probably the evenings over 4 days preparing for most of my exams. At the time I was a trainer, so I was talking through exactly these services every day. This was my day job. My preparation time was actually my day job. A question asking, why is the associate a prerequisite for the specialty. It is, yes, during the beta, the specialty exams have gone through a beta period, and associate was a requirement to take the specialty exams. Another question here, is there a maximum number of attempts for retaking an exam? That seems like a kind of pessimistic way of thinking of things. I don't believe there is a maximum number of attempts, but there is a calling off period. If you do not pass an exam, I believe you do need to wait. In the chat room, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you do need to wait a month before retaking the exam. But everyone here is going to be fine. Question assigned to me, are there any simulated questions in the exam? Circling back to the previous one, you can take an exam up to 3 times in 1 year from the date of your first attempt, is the answer for the previous question. Are there any simulated questions in the exam? The questions are going to look a lot like the sample questions that we just walked through. They are multiple choice questions. Some are going to be select the one correct answer. Some questions are going to be select the 2 correct steps. It'll tell you how many correct answers there are. Another question here, for the entry level, fresh out of college, which exam do you actually recommend? Again, that's really going to be driven by your experience. I do see a lot of people start with the Solutions Architect Associate exam. Have a look at the sample questions, take a practice exam, just decide where you are most familiar with, where you are most comfortable before taking the exam. Okay, question, for a new developer who has no experience with AWS, what is a good sample project I can set myself that will help me use all the AWS services I need to know about to pass this associate exam? That's a big question. What's a good sample project? We do have a GitHub AWS Labs. There is a handful of projects there on GitHub under AWS Labs. I would focus on the developer-related services. If DynamoDB is not something you've used in the past, maybe work on a little project that uses DynamoDB as the backend. The developer exam is going to ask questions about services like EC2. Are you familiar with VPC? Are you familiar with all the different instance types of EC2? I can't actually think of a good sample project that would cover everything. Jump into QuickLab, run through some labs on services that you may not be familiar with, and then use that to really inform your study from there. Is there a maximum attempts for retaking the exam? And we did have that question earlier. The answer is up to 3 times in 1 year from the date of your first attempt. Question here, is the certification exam online or do we have to go to a physical place to take the exam? And the answer is yes, you do go to one of our certification partners and take the exam at the certification partner location. Quick reminder, read through the email that they send you. They require you to be there 15 minutes earlier, and they do require you to bring 2 forms of identification. Read through that email. Please don't mess up before you even take the exam. Have all those forms of ID and get there early as well. Do you have to be a fluent developer to pass the developer or SysOps associate exam? Are there any questions directly related to coding and debugging? Very similar to a previous question that we had. There are not questions specific to a language. It is certainly going to be very, very helpful to know a developing language, to know a scripting language, but the questions themselves are not directly related to coding and debugging. The questions themselves focus on the actual services. A question here about the real and practice exams. Will I see what I got wrong? What were the right answers to the questions? Can I keep a list of questions for later somehow? So at the end of the exam, it does give you a breakdown of percentages. Each section of the exam, you'll get a percentage for the section, but you will not be given the breakdown of exactly which questions you got correct and which questions were incorrect. It is just a roll-up percentage by the section of the exam. Is it possible to go back in the exam? So answering a question, I want to go back to it later. Yes, you can. And yes, you can mark questions for review. There's a little checkbox at the end of each question that you can click and say, come back to this one. At the point where you submit the exam, all of the questions appear as hyperlinks. So you can click through to that hyperlink and jump back to any of the previous questions. You also get the opportunity to fill out a survey at the end of it. And me personally, I get to the very end of the exam. I just want to know the results. My brain is kind of fried. I generally don't do the surveys, but you get an opportunity to complete a survey there as well. I'm still shaking 15 minutes after clicking OK. It's a very nerve-wracking time for me when I go, okay, yes, I want to submit the exam, click, I get back into my car and I'm still shaking 20 minutes later, but I managed to pass all 5 of them. How difficult is it for someone without any hands-on experience on AWS to pass the associate level exam? What resources do we have to get hands-on experience with AWS so we can face the exam with confidence? Very good question. The exams are certainly designed to test your hands-on knowledge of AWS. I wouldn't go into these exams attempting some rote memorization of a whole bunch of AWS services. They are written to test hands-on experience. Second part of the question is, what resources do we have to get hands-on experience? There is a free tier on AWS. Create yourself an account on AWS. Set yourself some projects to do that keep you under the free tier. And also the online labs. Quicklabs.com, QWIK labs.com. There are labs, introductory labs there for almost every service. Follow through the step-by-step instructions. Stick to the instructions. Learn what the lab is trying to teach you. And if you have any further questions, follow that up with your own study. There's a question here. How much overlap is there between developer, architect, and SysOps? Would it be helpful to take them close to each other? That's a good question. There is overlap between those because they are covering a lot of the same services. For an associate level exam, a lot of the questions are going to focus on a single service, and those services are going to be shared between developer, architect, and SysOps. I would expect developer to focus on more developer-related questions, maybe questions about databases, about DynamoDB. Is it helpful to take them close to each other? For me, yes. That's how I study. I fill up my brain with a whole bunch of knowledge to go in and take an exam, and if your brain is not using that knowledge every day, it slowly gets garbage collected and ejected out of your brain. Different for different people, but personally, yes, I do find it helpful to take the exams close to each other. When I completed my 5th exam, the best thing about it was that it was the 5th and last exam at the time. We've now created 3 more exams, so I've set myself some goals for when those specialty exams are released to complete the specialty exams. I would likely be doing those very close to each other. Okay, we are close to coming up onto time, so I'm just going to answer 1 or 2 more questions until we hit the buzzer. Will you get a score for taking the practice exam? And the answer is yes, you do get a score for taking the practice exam. The only exam that I have failed, I'm revealing a lot here, was the DevOps Professional Practice exam. I actually didn't treat it like an exam. I blasted through it as far. I had 2 hours to study for that exam. My manager, who had no dog in this race, convinced me that I could go and take the exam at no notice. I had 2 hours to study for it, so I blasted through the practice exam just to use that to inform my study, and I got a score at the end of